Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Practical Data Science. So in this session of the class, I want to start with a couple of housekeeping items. And precisely, we're going to start with the API on OpenAI platform. And then we're going to be walking through a couple of basic building blocks of how to create your own API and how you're going to do that perhaps locally using Fast API. And then how do you do that on the cloud more like professionally? So, of course, I don't expect everyone to reproduce this, and I'm going to make the deliverable very clear, and it will basically be forms of question answering. As long as you watch the video, you understood the concept, you are good to go. Some of these platforms and some of these tools require access to, for example, AWS. Obviously, you're not required to have your own AWS account. So we're going to focus on concept, and we're going to focus on your ability to understand these concepts. So with that being said, let's start with the housekeeping item. First things first, it's the OpenAI API. So OpenAI is the company that produced ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is a user interface, right? It's a user interface that you can talk to it. We can, as a computer science student, you of course need to go above and beyond that, right? So what that means is you need to be able to make API calls if someone provide you an endpoint. So that's gonna be the start. So that's gonna be the start. And when I say API, you can pretty much Google this. API is short for Application Programming Interface. It is a protocol. It is a protocol to connect you with some sort of software. So if you heard of curl, client URL, that's also what that means. So for example, I can go to my terminal window and I can say curl CURL. This means client URL. And then I can literally just type in google.com and then hopefully something will happen, right? Something will happen. This is essentially me making an API call to this endpoint, right? Whatever this is. In this case, it's www.google.com. And then it's going to say the status code is 200. That means it's success. And then you get something back, right? Now, of course, there's nothing going on here. I didn't really type in query or nothing like that. Of course, you're not going to get anything back. But if you type in some sort of a query, let's say this API that I just type in Google search, it's based on some sort of query, right? The query is happening on the URL, API short for. That's the keywords that I physically type in, API short for. That happens up here. So as the same example, just to demonstrate you what I mean by API call, I can grab this URL. I can go to a terminal window. Let me clear this up. I can say CURL, client URL, paste this in here. It will get something back, right? So you get the idea. Making an API call means I am using some sort of invoke URL, very much like a web address, to do something with it. Now, what response do I get back? That depends on how this API is defined, which of course, we're going to talk about all of that in today's video. So before we dive into details, let's start with something simple, right? An API call to ChatGPT OpenAI, it's essentially this, right? When I say this, I'm talking about this code here. This is a Python framework. You don't have to do Python framework. You can go to drop-down button and collect the one that you want, right? You can do curl, CURL, and you can literally physically grab this and put it in your command. It'll be the same thing. Of course, you want to have your OpenAI API key here, right? And it's your job to be in charge of your API key. It's like a key to your door, right? Or something in your wallet, right? Obviously, as instructor, I don't have access to your own API key. So I would very much encourage all of you guys to be in charge of your own API key, right? That means to keep it safe. That means you know what it is and no one else knows what it is, right? This is just for security purpose. So with that being said, you can run this, but in terms of this video, I'm going to do it in Python because I think Python is the most common language in this class. So you can, of course, grab this and then go to a notebook, right? For simplicity, I'm going to go to Colab. And then if you just run this off the bat, I can connect to this. I'll show you guys step by step. If you just run this off the bat without doing anything else, there's actually two problems, right? Number one is I have not installed OpenAI. It's not a OpenAI is not a built-in package, right? So how do I know that? Well, I can do a exclamation mark. I can do pip list. This will list out all of the existing packages out of the box when I connect to this particular session. So you can scroll up and down. You're not going to find OpenAI here if you have not installed it. OPQ, RST, the O is the letters that are all presented here. I do not see OpenAI, right? I do not see, oh, that's actually OpenAI here, but I think that's an old package. So I don't think you need to. So I think I might have installed that before. Let me clean a new session just to show you guys what do I mean by that. So let me give you a new session and then let me reconnect. And then let me run this again because I don't believe OpenAI is a built-in package. So I just reconnected. Let's see if I'm correct or not. So OPQ RST, let me scroll up. Oh, it's still here. That's interesting. Let me test it out by running this import, see if it works. If it works, then we have it. If not, then we don't. Okay, in this case, we have it. I think it's because I previously installed it. Somehow it carried the memory. But if it's the first time you're using it, you need to do pip install. So that's number one thing that this code might crash. The other thing is I have not defined API key in here. So if I run this client, it will give you an error. So let's take a look at that error. So here it says, okay, there's an error. It's an OpenAI error. If you just read this, you don't know what that error is, right? You got to keep reading. So here it explained that the API key client option must be set either by passing API key to the client or by setting as environment variable, right? So this last sentence tell me what's wrong with it, right? So I have not talked about API key here. I have not defined it. That's why this line of code does not work, okay? So if I give a random string, let's say API key, blah, 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 right? Obviously, this is not an API key. It's something I made up, right? So let's see what the error is. So we know that this key doesn't work, right? It's a fake key I made up. So let's take a look. So in this case, it's going to say, okay, the key is incorrect, right? The key is incorrect. So that also tells you what's wrong with it, right? So you enter something, but if the thing you enter is invalid, then obviously it doesn't work, right? So that also gives you a clue of what's going on. So in this case, you need to grab your key. So if this is the first time you are doing it, you will need to go to the platform.openai.com, and then you will need to go to top right corner, go to your profile, and then you want to go to your OpenAI API key, and then find your key here, right? So that's how you do it. So if you have not created it, then you just create a key here. Or if you create it and delete it, then obviously you're not going to see anything here, right? That's like what's showing up here. So you get the idea. That's how you get it. Now here's the thing regarding this. On top left corner, there's something called a free token. I don't think free token is available for everyone, meaning that someone has used free token before, someone have not. If this is the first time you're using it, hopefully you get some free tokens. If you already have a free token set and then it's past this validation day and age, then obviously the free token doesn't work either. Disregard how much you use it. Some people use free token maybe once or twice, but they miss out on this validation window, then obviously it doesn't work either, right? So I can't really look into your account to tell you what's wrong with that. I can only tell you the location, give you the tools and knowledge to do that, right? So all of these things could matter and could result in a failed API call, right? So it's up to you to check in your account what's going on with your free token, what's going on with your API key, and if you need to create a new key or things like that, right? And then worst case scenario, if you don't have any in worst case scenario, if you try all of them didn't work, check your billing, right? Obviously, you need to have some sort of balance. Like for instance, in this case, I put in uh like for instance, in this case, on my account, I have $36 of balance left. That means I can keep making API call until I spend $36. So if I spend more than that, obviously I got an alert of, obviously I got an alert. I need to extend the credit balance by putting more money in, or cancel the plan, or do something else with it. Well, obviously, if you cancel the plan or if you don't have enough credits in it, it could also resolve in a failed API call, right? So that's how they bill you, that's how they charge you, and someone is providing you this as a service. So that's the logic of what's going on here. And then on top of that, you can also go to usage and limits. So let's click on limits. Limits is essentially saying how much can you make API call, and what's the token limit, meaning that what's the content size that you can send in the API call, and then if there's some sort of rates associated to it, right? So these things might not be clear for you right now. Once we talked about how to create API calls, these things will be very clear for you. So hopefully, end of today's video, you guys will have an in-depth understanding of why these things are created for the users. Right now they might seem annoying, but that's okay. Hopefully, you can just bear with it in a few minutes, and then I'll explain to you what that means. So right now, just bear with me. I'm gonna come back to explain this, what's going on. But these parameters are set so basically they don't blow up their computer. That's basically what it is. And then they also have a better pricing strategy associated with how they can market this and put this to the public. So that's the limit. And then on top of that, we have usage. Usage is how much you use it, right? Like if you make a lot of API calls or if you have not make a lot of API calls, how much you're using it, right? That's what that means. So usage in my table, this is my personal account, right? I have from March 16th to March 31st, I have about, this is the highest bar, right? Highest bar here says 18 cents. So that's pretty much how much I use it by making a few API calls here and there, teaching a class, or using them myself as some sort of demo. That's pretty much the scale and distribution of my personal API calls. As you can see, it should not be killing you, right? Someone tell me that it's charging them a lot of money, like a gigantic cost. You're gonna have to really explain that to me because I make a couple hundred API calls a day and I'm getting less than $1. So if you are making a few API calls and then someone's charging you a lot of money, then something else is wrong, right? So it means that maybe there's another side of the picture that you're just missing out. If that's the case for you, just explain to me the situation and then hopefully I can help you better, right? But if you do everything just like I do, right? You have an API key in there. You are using the package that I showed you for 5 API calls. It should not be a lot of money, right? We're talking about 18 cents for the highest amount. Usually for day-to-day basis, I'm probably paying like 9 cents, 1 cent, 3 cents. This day I pay 9 cents. This day I pay 9 cents. And most recently I pay less than 1 cent. So it should not be killing you. But if that's killing you, let me know, right? Um, so that's in regards to the cost. And just once again, right? This is not a class that you should be paying money for. I don't expect anybody to do that. If somehow your budget does not allow you, just let me know. So that's the API usage. And then you have data control. I don't think that's a whole lot of matter to us in this particular case because all the data is made up that we're gonna use. So because all data that we're gonna be using for API calls is completely made up on the spot. So I don't think that matters a whole lot. I think in the case of this class, limits and usage, it's probably gonna be the two parameters that you worry about the most. And then of course, on top of that, your API keys, right? So with all that being said, now let's go back to our notebook or Colab or whatever other environment that you prefer. And then you have to enter your API key. So you can do export, something like that. And that's your API key. Or it depends on what you prefer, right? In my case, I typically prefer to go with where you make that API call, right? So what I mean by that is this. In this case, it's a notebook environment. The notebook environment is in Python. So to make sure that this client knows what the API key is, I will prefer not to do export. Now, of course, in the previous tutorial, the reason I did export is because a tiny true package it's invoked in the Python environment in terminal. That is a different environment than Jupyter Notebook. So in that case, I prefer to do export, right? So that's the difference between export and set your API key in here, right? So in this case, I'm going to do ladder. So I'm going to get rid of export and I'm going to find my API key. So in this case, I have a save here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you navigate to the left-hand side. You click on this key button, and then you can add your secret here. So in this case, you add a new secret as your OpenAI API key, things like that. So let me show you what I mean by a tutorial. So this is a fake blah key. And then let's say I enter 123, right? As simple as that, 123. So that's it, right? I can save 123 in here and no one else can see it unless they log into your Google Drive, right? That would be a different story. Why would you want to do that? If you give your Google Drive password to somebody else, that's on you, right? So that's my key. 123 is here, right? 123. And then how do you get it? In your Python environment, is you scroll down here, you copy these 2 lines of code. So copy, and then you can go in a random code cell and just paste it in there. In this case, it's not secret name, right? Your secret name is changed to fake block key. So fake block key, let's put it here, and then we'll assign that to user data. I'm gonna say grant access. In this case, you'll be able to have fake block key to be defined as 123 as a string, just like that, right? So every time for the rest of this notebook session, you run this fake block key, it is always going to give you 123. So whatever that 123 is in your API key, that's going to be what this variable saved. Okay. So with that being said, now I can get rid of that, and then you guys get the idea, right? Now I can scroll back up. I can then grab my OpenAI API key, and then I can put it here, and then I put it here, and I run it. It will save that OpenAI key in this variable. Obviously, I'm not going to show you what that is, and because of a security purpose. But what I am going to do is put it in here so the client can read that. Good. Once client can read it, this API call should be able to work, right? So let's execute that again. Let's see what the output is. Okay, here's the output. It's able to give me something out, and then that's the response. So write 1 sentence bedtime story about a unicorn. Here is what it gives me, right? Once upon a time, in a moonlit meadow, a gentle unicorn with a shimmering silver mane danced among the stars. You get the idea. So I do this once, right? I run this once, just like that. I run it once. That is one API call, right? Behind the scene, this package is going to take this message as a payload and then send this message to the API call. So what I mean by that is if I go back to the platform and then I can show you what the API call is. If I do a curl, this is the invoke URL. And this invoke URL carry a message body. And that message body is going to be what I am putting in here. Alternatively, you can put in whatever you want. Since it's a language model, of course, it behaves just like ChatGPT, right? You can say, tell me a joke. It will tell you a joke, right? Why did the bicycle fall over? Because it was too tired, something like that. So you get the idea. If you're able to get to this spot, that means you have successfully made an API call, and that means the API call is complete. And not only is it complete, you've actually got some response back, right? So let's take a look at the response. This completion is assigned to this API call. So whatever this API call responded to you, it should be in this completion object. So let's take a look at this completion object, and then let's see what's in it. I'm sorry, I had a typo there. So this is what a completion object look like. It's a built-in class object by, of course, in this case, OpenAI, right? And then, of course, this is not all of it, right? It's a class object, meaning you have methods. So click on dot, it will show you a bunch of things: choices, construct, copy, created, dictionary. You get the idea, right? There's a bunch of stuff in here. Also, if you do the most simple one, let's say ID, it will give you an ID that's associated with this API call, right? So you have some sort of traceability. So for the sake of a class tutorial, this is not that helpful. What's helpful is to get the content out of it. Like for example, this joke here that we tell it to give us, that should be in there, right? So the way you do that is to follow this kind of construct. So what I mean by that is you can type in choices. Let's do this one by one. So in this case, you have a bracket. A bracket has a choice, and then that choice has something in it. Okay, so in this case, this bracket has one item in there. How do I know? Well, I can grab this and check out the length. If you check out the length as one, that means there's one item in this completion dot choices. And you can also check the type of this. It should say list or array. So that's what it is. So once you know what that is, you grab the first item and it gives you the first choice. Of course, if you do the second one, bracket one, that's the second item in the list, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is because you don't have a second item in the list. So it's gonna say out of range. So if you do two or three, obviously it doesn't work, right? So you're gonna have to grab the one that it has. So grab the one that it has. Now what's gonna happen is this is another class object, right? So you can check out the type. I believe it's a class object with an init, and then underneath this there's like attribute. There are like a bunch of methods. So let's check out what methods it have. And then in this case, you want to do message. So if we click on message, it's another class object, right? And then you want to get the content out of it. So in this case, you go with content, and boom, there you go. That is the actual response. And in this case, you notice that there's a slash n here. The slash n here means you're going on a break, right? A line break. So that will take you to a new line. So that's why you see here actually has a new line, actually has a space in here, right? In between these two lines. That's why there are two slash n's. So that's what that's about. So this context is actually a string type. So if you check out type, it's a string. String basically means a sentence, right? It's a text in there. So you can also print it out. If you print it out, it will have the correct format and the slash n will be gone. Okay. So this is just to show you what's in the response coming out of that API key, and then hopefully you get the idea, right? So if you are following what I'm talking about so far, then you understood how to make an API key. And in this case, this API key is provided from this client, and this client is produced by OpenAI. And of course, their endpoint, and of course, OpenAI support this endpoint. OpenAI provide a service. OpenAI, of course, also charge you on it. Whether you like it or not, that's a separate issue. But this is how the system is set up right now. And then on top of that, what I can also tell you is for other type of API calls, it pretty much follows the same format. The only thing different is the payload. Okay, so for example, let me take your attention to image. Let's say you're doing image. Image means you have to send the image in, right? Otherwise, how do you see the image, right? So you have to send the image in. So this payload, as you can see here, it's a little bit longer, right? It's a little bit longer in the sense that not only are you sending in a text, a sentence, you're also sending in this case, an image URL, just like that, image URL. If it's a URL, that means it's a JPEG format, right? And that also means that this image is publicly available. If this image is in your own computer somewhere, obviously it doesn't recognize, right? So this is obviously need to be a public URL. Public, what do I mean by that is you can grab this and then I'm gonna copy it and can go to a new tab, literally just anywhere on the browser. You hit enter, you're gonna get an image. Right? So that's what I mean by public image URL. And same thing, I can then run this to curl, or I can go to Python, and then I can just grab this, and I can do the same thing. So I'm gonna copy it, and then I'm gonna go down here, and you get the idea, right? I can make the same API call. But of course, here I don't want to redefine this client because client should be already defined up here. So I don't want to redefine that. So I'm gonna get rid of these two lines of code, and then I'm gonna run this API call directly with this sentence and on top of the sentence with this image URL. So I'm running this again. It will physically grab that URL and then it will condense it and then it's going to make an API call to sentence and image. And it says the image features a wooden walkway or boardwalk that stretches through a lush green area, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. And then, of course, you can click on it. It makes sense, right? This is a wooden area, they're green, so all that makes sense. So this is indeed describing this image, at least based on the knowledge of that particular language model. Okay, so That's if the URL is public. What if you have a URL that's private, right? So what you do here is you pass in the picture here as an encoded image. So encoded here means base64, okay? So same thing. You can basically just copy this whole thing, go to your notebook, and then paste it in here. Client, we already talked about that. I'm not going to define that, so I'm going to get rid of that. But basically for this package, you do need it, right? Because you are taking a picture and you are converted into a format called base64, and the format is required for you to make that API call. This is if you are physically passing this image through this API call, right? If you're physically passing this into this API call as part of the payload. So when you make this API call, you will physically be sending this data from your computer or wherever your directory is. In this case, my directory is here, right, on Colab. But if it's from your computer, then it's from your own computer, right? So you'll be physically using internet to talk to that endpoint using this payload and based on whatever API key in here, right? So if I run this code right off the bat, some of you might notice it doesn't work because this image path is telling me path to your image.jpg. I do not have such file. So if I run this, it doesn't work. It will give you a bug, say, okay, there's no such file. Well, that makes perfect sense because there's no such file in my directory, right? So you see this kind of error if that is the case. So what I need to do is just to physically get a picture in here, right? So I can just save this locally in my download. So I can save this locally. So I can save this locally in my download. And what I'm going to do is upload that into my directory on Colab. So once I upload it, I click on these three dots. I say copy path, and then I put the path in here to replace that. Now this means I am pointing this image path to this image, right? I can double click on this and show you that's what that image is. Great. So you get the idea. Now let me close that. And then if I run this, this should be able to work, and it should be able to give me something similar, if not exactly the same. So I'm going to run this again. It's going to take this path, read that image, encode it into base64 format, and then put this base64 format image into this payload and make that API call. And then it says something similar, right? So let me make this bigger. The image shows peaceful landscape with a wooden boardwalk or pathway leading through a field of lush green grass. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. It pretty much is exactly the same as this. It might be a little bit different depending on the temperature. Temperature controls the variability of your answer, but overall, semantically, they should be talking about that same picture because I pass in the same picture in both API calls. So if your sentence does not look like, so if your sentence does not even look remotely like this picture, then probably something's wrong. Or if you upload your own picture, then it should describe what's in your own picture. So that's the idea. And hopefully this explains what it means to make an API call using the OpenAI platform as if you are a developer, right? Not through the ChatGPT window user interface, because that's not considered a developer. A developer means you're using code, okay? So thank you for watching part A. Part A explains the API call and how that works from the usage, from the user perspective. In this case, the user is a developer. Next part, we're going to come back and I'm going to explain to you how to create an API call. And then we're going to do that using Fast API, or we can also do that using AWS. And I'm going to explain both. And then hopefully by the end of today's session, you have an in-depth understanding of what it means when someone say, make an API call. And then hopefully you can take some of these knowledge and hopefully you take some of these knowledge with you for future. And hopefully that sheds some light when you are doing things on the internet. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in part 2.